if you're barking and critiquing the umpire and you're always engaged in a little bit of back and forth, maybe the umpire looks at you and says, no, not today, young man.
There might have been some warning signs early, but the Dockers, they remain 3 games on top, looking quite comfortable to take out the minor premiership.
The Liam Baker we've seen this year isn't the Liam Baker we saw 12 months ago, Mitch, when he won the John Worsfold medal. They turn the football over in bad areas. Their skill level still isn't at the required level.
Hello, I'm Mitch Keating, stepping in for Mark Stevens today, but we remain in the safe hands of WA's finest in Digby, Beacham to tackle all things West Coast and Freo for the Outer Wing. Brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. Let's get into it. All right, Diggers, another derby done and dusted, and the Dockers doing it quite comfortably. For Freo fans, it maybe wasn't the perfect night for them, but all that matters is they got the win over the big brother.
Yeah, exactly right, Mitch. Great to have a chat to you. Yeah, spot on. Anytime you win a derby over here, if you're a West Coast or Fremantle fan, you don't care how it's achieved. All that matters to those supporters is that you beat either the little brother or the little brother beats the big brother. And on this occasion, like we have seen a fair bit of late, it was Fremantle who came to the fore. It wasn't pretty, either early and particularly late. I think it got a bit scrappy as well. But Fremantle's class shone through. They sit on top of the ladder for a reason, and West Coast know only too well.
Like you said, there might have been some warning signs early, but the Dockers, they remain 3 games on top, looking quite comfortable to take out the minor premiership. But you still think there's little areas that are popping up that they need to get right, areas they need to hone in this run home right up till September to make sure that they are the out-and-out real contender for the premiership.
Yeah, I think so, Mitch. Undeniably so. Look, they just need to really just sharpen up, hone, tweak, call it what you will. They need a very, very complete performance. Now, they've got time. Yeah, as you said, they're 3 games clear on top of the ladder. They are going to win the minor premiership again. It's not something that's happened all that often. I think it might have only happened once before with Fremantle back in the Ross Lyon era. So this is a very, very good body of work that they've put together. But if you're to be super critical, and it's hard to be critical of a side which sits where they do with a 17-2 win-loss record, they've been a little bit sloppy in the course of games over the last 5 or 6 weeks. We know that they were beaten in the nation's capital by GWS. They've trailed in some games only to slip themselves when they've needed to. But I think Fremantle fans would breathe a little bit easier if they witness their side produce a complete 120 minutes of football, and they get the opportunity to do so this weekend against the Western Bulldogs here in Perth.
Now, once again, Freo's injury list is looking pretty minor, and they'll get a small cavalry coming back this week. Brennan Cox and Hayden Young, we expect to play. O'Meara now to miss. What are the selection changes you're looking at for this week for the Dockers?
Yeah, well, certainly Hayden Young will come back. He was ill last week and was left out. So basically that was a no-brainer. Now, there was an expectation Brennan Cox was going to come back, Mitch, but Justin Longmuir on TV over here last night said they would probably err on the side of caution, give him another week. I don't think he was on the injury list, so that was a little bit of a surprise, but certainly they'll be boosted by Hayden Young, and we only have to cast our mind back to Marvel Stadium earlier this year, and Hayden Young put on a bit of a clinic, didn't he? He kicked that goal from the centre square when he sort of pushed aside Marcus Bontempelli, and then there was that banana in the pocket late as the game got really tight. So the Western Bulldogs are probably ruining the fact that Hayden Young is fit, healthy and ready to go.
And when we talk about the matchup itself, like I said, it was a ripping contest out east, and now we head over to Optus on Friday night. Where do you see the Dockers being able to exploit the Bulldogs, who have been, well, they're right in the finals hunt still and playing somewhat undermanned, but still at full throttle, the Dogs under Luke Beveridge? Yeah,
They've been really good, the Dogs, haven't they? As you said, they have been undermanned, but you wouldn't know it. They continue to continually compete. Defensively, they were sound last week. This is a different beast, though, for mine, Mitch, and what we do know with Fremantle, we've seen it time and time again. I sound like a broken record, and apologies for that. But when Fremantle are able to have a period of dominance in the course of a game, in the course of 5 or 10 minutes, they kick 3 or 4 goals, and all of a sudden there's separation between themselves and their opponents. We saw that against the Bulldogs earlier this year. Now, there is a little bit of weather around here on Friday night. That's what the forecast says. But I think forward of centre is a genuine area of dominance for Fremantle, particularly against the Bulldogs' defence, which isn't, respectfully, it's not their strongest suit. They've done okay undermanned, but when you're up against the likes of a Voss and a Tracy and an Amos who's in excellent nick, and there's Frederick, and there's Dudley, there's Switkowski, there's Bolton, Young will go forward at stages. That's where Fremantle look like they hold the whip hand, and I expect that's where Fremantle will impart their dominance.
All right, that's Freo done for another week. All right, and Digby, is it fair to say that the Eagles would have come away with some positives? I think Rhett Bazzo particularly won his best game in an Eagles jumper, it seemed like. 12 marks, first time he's hit double digits in his young career, and a good job on Josh Tracy. But again, there's still a considerable amount to get right.
Yeah, exactly right, Mitch. And you're right in regards to Rhett Bazzo. I'm a fan and have been for a while. He's just hasn't had a run at it with his body. We know there's been some personal tragedies as well. So he's had to deal with a fair bit, this young man. But Andrew McQualter has made him work for his spot. And since he's come back into the side, he's just got better and better. His intercept marking ability is starting to show some real fruit. And I think that Rhett Bazzo is going to be a player for West Coast for a long period of time. But look, they had moments, didn't they, against Fremantle? And you thought at stages in this game, okay, this is going to be interesting. And then basically self-inflicted wounds. Mitch, for mine, they turn the football over in bad areas. Their skill level still isn't at the required level. They like to sort of play a chaotic brand, and they want to take the game on, which is good. We should be celebrating that. But you also have to know your limitations. So they've got some work to do, West Coast. And in the end, it was a pretty disappointing loss, it must be said.
Now, it's another week of Harley in the headlines. And this week, it's more focused on the kind of whistle he's getting out of matches, whether it comes down to the officiating or his discipline or leadership. Do you think it's a combination of those, or do you think there's a clear reason why some are pointing at this view that Harley maybe does get officiated a little bit differently to others?
Yeah, look, I'll be interested to get your thoughts. From where I sit, Mitch, I think he does. And is that because of Harley's intense, I suppose, attitude and his bullish desire to win every contest? And sometimes he does overstep. But I think sometimes he probably doesn't get the free kick he deserves. But if you're barking and critiquing the umpire and you're always engaged in a little bit of back and forth, maybe the umpire looks at you and says, no, not today, young man. And he's not the first. I think Wayne Carey was one who had a somewhat volatile relationship with the umpires, at a time when you could be manhandled as a key forward, and he didn't get the free kicks he deserves. There is a Toby Green tax. I'd just like to see West Coast maybe get hold of Harley Reid and just say, listen, this is what we need you to do because you are going to be a leader of this football club. I've advocated he should be made captain as soon as possible, and I think it would be a good thing for him. But one thing with Harley Reid, he's such a competitive beast that he wants to win every contest. He wants to win every game. There's a lot of good with Harley. There's a few little bad things that sometimes creep into his game. But for me, the original question, is he umpired differently? From where I sit, yes. I'm not sure what it looks like over there on the East Coast. Yeah,
as we know, Harley brings an aggression like very few players of his age do, and that'll certainly at times might cross a line, and I think that umpires have every right to pay what they see sometimes. In saying that, though, there is that noise of affirmation. He's public enemy number one up against just about every team. And when you've got a derby on too, the Dockers fans are really going to want to push and appeal for any free kick they can get going their way, particularly with when Harley's around the contest. So I think there is a balance. You're right. I think there is certainly enough that he's stiff on, but that is the case for a lot of footballers as well. And then it does swing the other way. You're right. He probably does have to peel back a little bit, but we'll soon, I think, see that leader, and hopefully it all works out in his favour in the near future. Now, they've got the Tigers this week. They head over to the MCG on a game on Sunday. They haven't beaten Richmond in their last three, and two sides who have been probably on par with each other over those last two seasons. Do we see this as the game that the Eagles can snap that streak, or do we have that maybe swaying in favour of the Tigers once more?
Well, I think they get a look, Mitch. And, we talk about when you are presented with an opportunity, you must take it. And West Coast didn't earlier this year at home against a young and depleted Richmond side. And it caused a bit of consternation, it must be said. There was a bit of heat on Andrew McQualter in the wake of that performance because they left out some younger players and they sort of selected a little bit of experience. And I think to guard against being too young, but also I think they saw that as an opportunity to win, and they didn't. They had their noses in front at stages, but they weren't able to push on and win that game. So Looking at their fixture, this is a game that I think West Coast should be expected to win. They should head east and expect that their best is good enough to beat a Richmond side, because there aren't many more winnable games in the run home.
Now, when we talk about team selection for this week, we expect Liam Baker to come back after that week off with suspension. He's coming up against his former club as well, a real leader for the Eagles. What do you want to see? What are you expecting from Liam Baker in his return game?
Just want to see him lead. I want to see him perform at a really high level, disciplinary-wise, and also basically skill and leadership, because the Liam Baker we've seen this year isn't the Liam Baker we saw 12 months ago, Mitch, when he won the John Worsfold medal in his first year at West Coast. He was outstanding. He led from the front, even though he wasn't co-captain. He has been elevated to co-captain this year, but he has been far too inconsistent for a player of his standing, and West Coast don't have many elite players. So, and I'm not saying Liam's elite. Respectfully, he's a very, very good player, but he needs to be at his absolute optimum for the remainder of this season and show West Coast that he is the right man to co-captain this football club into 2027 and beyond.
Yeah, I think you're right, Diggs. He could be a real catalyst on Sunday when the Eagles chase another win. They're probably the most winnable game to see out the rest of the season. All right, that's West Coast done for another week.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about. What are you really gambling with?
Let's have a look at your list this week, because we couldn't go this episode without talking about Murphy Reid, the youngest Glendenning Allen Medal winner in the Derby's history. His first 2 seasons, he's backing up a Rising Star winning campaign with potentially an All-Australian selection campaign, is the young Docker. And his first 2 seasons probably stack up as a top 5, first 2 between any Freo and West Coast player. And that's the list you've got for us this week, is your 5-4-3-2-1, the best first 2 seasons you've seen from a WA footballer. Where do you want to start? Start at number 5. I'm assuming Murphy makes the list, but is he at number 5?
Yeah, he is, Mitch. You got me doing a bit of homework this week in the absence of Steve. I thought I might have it a week off the list, but you've cracked the whip, so that's okay. Look, I went back, and maybe because I'm an old bastard, but I've been able to see West Coast since they came into the competition all those years ago, and I must admit, going through this list, and I was thinking about who and what and where, and I came up with the best, as we said, the best first 2 seasons by a West Coast and Fremantle player. And at 5, I ummed and ahed between Ben Cousins and Peter Matera, but I lent the way of Peter. I think he only played 5 games in his debut year back in 1990. He was a 20-year-old, but then he just went nuts in 1991 when West Coast were clearly on the march to a grand final out there at Waverley against Hawthorn. He played 26 games. I think he kicked in excess of 30 goals on a wing. He had over 530 disposals, and he just stamped himself as an elite midfielder who would then go on and win a Norm Smith medal, effectively win West Coast a grand final. So I just put him ahead of Ben Cousins, who's probably a bit stiff. He made his debut as a 17-year-old Ben. He kicked in excess of I think 30-odd goals himself in his debut year when he was still only finishing as an 18-year-old. But I put Peter Matera in at 5. I've actually gone Murphy Reid at 4. This young man, we probably shouldn't be surprised. He did kick 4 goals in 10 minutes on debut against Geelong down in Geelong last year. Rising Star winner, the youngest Glendenning Allen medalist in history. Last weekend was outstanding. His year last year was super, and he's just gone to another level. And you're right, he should be in All-Australian consideration, Murphy Reid. So I've got him in at 4, marginally behind Paul Hazelby, who burst onto the scene as a really, really high-end inside midfielder. He finished second in their club champion count, Mitch. Paul Hazelby in his first season, Rising Star winner. Now, he came off a peg in 2001, but they were a dreadful football side, Fremantle, back then. I think they won 1 game for the year, so I'm a little bit forgiving of that. But Paul Hazelby, and then he went on to have a storied career. He was an outstanding big game player against West Coast, so I've got him in at 3. 2, I've got Glenn Jakovic. Made his debut back in 1991. He played 16, 17 games. He was a big, physically imposing young man, Jacko. And then, obviously, in 1992, he played just about every game, if I'm mistaken. He might have missed one. I think he was third in their best and fairest. He was a key member of that half-back line when he had Worsfold on one half-back flank and he had McKenna on the other. But he was an outstanding key defender. So I've got Jacko in as the second best first 2 seasons by a West Coast and Fremantle player, and it's probably no surprise. Chris Judd, number one. We were fortunate to see Chris in full flight over here, launching his career. He played a game of waffle football when he was available for selection for AFL. He was outstanding for East Perth, I think it was back then. Then he was elevated to the AFL side, and he just didn't miss a beat. He played all 45 games of those first 2 seasons that he was available for. He was just a magnificent athlete, and he was part of this midfield which just built and built and built. We know that he would win a Brownlow medal. We know that Ben Cousins would win a Brownlow medal. Daniel Kerr would be prominent in Brownlow medal counting. And, we go back to that game up at the Gabba, Mitch, was it 2003? It was Chris's 34th game, kick 5 against the Lions. And then everyone went, if you didn't know or have a really great association with Chris and his accomplishments, I think everyone watched that game and went, wow, look what he's doing to the Premier side on their ground. So, yeah, that's my list. So Judd at 1, Glenn Jakovic 2, Paul Hazelby 3, just ahead of Murphy at 4, Murphy Reid that is, and Peter Matera 5.
I love the list. Like you said, hard to argue with number 1, and it's good to think that Murphy Reid's still got 6, 7, hopefully 8 or so more games under his belt to come, and I made a second final series for him in purple. So I love the list, Diggers, once again. And to finish off, you've got a couple bets for us for TABtouch. Gamble responsibly. What value are you looking at this week?
Well, I'm banking on this Fremantle forward line, which we touched on a little bit earlier, Mitch, to be quite dominant. So that is Josh Tracy, very much informed Jai Amos, and Pat Voss to kick at least 2+ goals each against the Bulldogs here on Friday night with TABtouch. That is paying $2.80. So we need 2 goals from the big 3 Fremantle key forwards. TABtouch, $2.80. I'm quite excited by that. And then the West Coast Richmond game, I'm thinking West Coast win. I don't think it's a blowout. I think it's a 1-39 margin, and that is paying with TABtouch $2.43.
Well, Diggers, thanks again. That'll wrap up another episode of The Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. We'll see you next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.